Hello, family. How's everyone doing? God bless you. And we pick up with the book of Enoch, chapter 90. And I saw until that in this manner 35 shepherds undertook the pasturing of the sheep, and they completed their periods as did the first, and others received them into their hands to pasture them for their period, each shepherd in his own period. And after that, I saw in my vision all the birds of heaven coming, the eagles, the vultures, the kikes, the ravens. But the eagles led all the birds, and they began to devour those sheep, and to pick out their eyes, and to devour their flesh. And the sheep cried out because their flesh was being devoured by the birds. And as for me, I looked and lamented in my sleep over that shepherd who pastured the sheep. And I saw until those sheep were devoured by the dogs and eagles and kikes, and they left neither flesh nor skin nor sinew remaining on them until only their bones stood there. And their bones too fell to the earth, and the sheep became few. And I saw until that 23 had undertaken the pasturing and completed in their many periods 58 times. But behold, lambs were born by those white sheep, and they began to open their eyes and to see and to cry to the sheep. They cried to them, but they did not hearken to what they said to them, but were very deaf, and their eyes were very blinded. And I saw in the vision of how the ravens flew on those lambs, and took one of those lambs, and dashed the sheep in pieces, and devoured them. And I saw until horns grew on those lambs, and the ravens cast down their horns. And I saw until there sprouted a great horn of one of those sheep, and their eyes were opened. And it looked at them, and their eyes opened. And it cried to the sheep. And the ram saw it, and all ran to it. Notwithstanding all this, those eagles and vultures and ravens and kikes kept on tearing the sheep, and swooning down on them, and devouring them until the sheep remained silent. But the ram lamented and cried out. And those ravens fought and battled with it, and sought to lay low its horn, but they had no power over it. All the eagles and vultures and ravens and kikes were gathered together, and there came with them all the sheep of the field. They all came together and helped each other to break that horn of the ram. And I saw that man who wrote down the names of the shepherds and brought them up before the Lord of the sheep came, and he helped that ram and showed it everything. Its helping was coming down. And I looked until the Lord of the sheep came to them angry. All those who saw him ran, and they all fell into the shadow in front of him. All the eagles and vultures and ravens and kikes gathered together and brought with them all the wild sheep. And they all came together and helped one another in order to dash the horn of the ram in pieces. And I looked at that man who wrote the book at the command of the Lord until he opened that book of the destruction that those last 12 shepherds had done. And he showed in front of the Lord of the sheep that they had destroyed even more than those before them had. And I looked And the Lord of the sheep came to them, and took the staff of his anger, and struck the earth. And the earth was split, and all the animals and the birds of the sky fell from those sheep and sank into the earth, and it closed over them. And I saw until a great sword was given to the sheep, and the sheep proceeded against all the beasts of the field to slay them. And all the beasts and the birds of the heaven fled before their face, fled before their face. And I saw that man who wrote the book according to the command of the Lord, until he opened that book concerning the destruction which those 12 last shepherds had wrought, and showed that they had destroyed much more than their predecessors before the Lord of the sheep. And I saw until the Lord of the sheep came to them, and took his hand and staff of his wrath, and smote the earth, and the earth clave asunder. And all the beasts and all the birds of heaven fell from among those sheep, and were swallowed up in the earth, and it covered them. And I saw until a throne was erected in the pleasant land, and the Lord of the sheep sat himself on it. And the other took the sealed books and opened those books before the Lord of the sheep. And the Lord called those men, the 7 first white ones, and commanded that they should bring before him, beginning with the first star, which led the way, all the stars whose private members were like those of horses. And they brought them all before him. And he said to that man who wrote before him, being one of those 7 white ones, and said to him, take those 70 shepherds to whom I delivered the sheep, and who are taking them on their own authority, slew more than I commanded them. And behold, they were all bound. I saw, and they all stood before him. And the judgment was held first over the stars, and they were judged and found guilty, and went to the place of condemnation. And they were cast into an abyss, full of fire and flaming, and full of pillars of fire. And those 70 shepherds were judged and found guilty, and they were cast into that fiery abyss. And I saw at that time how a like abyss was opened in the midst of the earth, full of fire, and they brought those blinded sheep, and they were all judged and found guilty, and cast into this fiery abyss, and they burned. Now this abyss was to the right of that house. And I saw those sheep burning, and their bones burning. And I stood up to see until they folded up that old house, and carried off all the pillars, and all the beams and ornaments of the house were at the same time folded up with it. And they carried it off and laid it in a place in the south of the land. And I saw until the Lord of the sheep brought a new house, greater and loftier than that first, and set it up in the place of the first, which had been folded up. All its pillars were new, and its ornaments were new, and larger than those of the first. The old one which he had taken away, and all the sheep were within it. And I saw all the sheep which had been left, and all the beasts on the earth, and all the birds of heaven, falling down and doing homage to those sheep, and making petition to and obeying them in everything. And thereafter, those three who were clothed in white and had seized me by my hand, and the hand of that ram also seizing hold of me, they took me up and set me down in the midst of those sheep before the judgment took place. And those sheep were all white, and their wool was abundant and clean. And all that had been destroyed and dispersed, and all the beasts of the field, and all the birds of heaven, assembled in that house. And the Lord of the sheep rejoiced with great joy, because they were all good and had returned to his house. And I saw until they laid down that sword, which had been given to the sheep, and they brought it back into the house, and it was sealed before the presence of the Lord. And all the sheep were invited into that house, but it held them not. And the eyes of them all were opened, and they saw the good, and there was not one among them that did not see. And I saw that house was large and broad and very full. Amen. And I saw that a white bull was born with large horns, and all the beasts of the field and all the birds of the air feared him and made petition to him all the time. And I saw until all their generations were transformed, and they all became white bulls, and the first among them became a lamb, and that lamb became a great animal and had great black horns on its head. And the Lord of the sheep rejoiced over it and over all the oxen. And I slept in their midst, and I awoke and saw everything. This is the vision which I saw while I slept, and I awoke and blessed the Lord of righteousness and gave him glory. Then I wept greatly, and my tears ceased not until I could no longer endure it. When I saw, they flowed on account of what I had seen. For everything shall come and be fulfilled, and all the deeds of men in their order were shown to me. On that night I remembered the first dream, and because of it I wept and was troubled, because I had seen that vision. Chapter 91. And now, my son Methuselah, call to me all your brothers, and gather together to me all the sons of your mother. For the word calls me, and the Spirit is poured out on me, that I may show you everything that shall befall you forever. And thereon Methuselah went and summoned to him all his brothers, and assembled his relatives. And he spoke to all the children of the righteous, and said, of the righteousness, and said, Hear, you sons of Enoch, all the words of your father, and hearken, as you should, to the voice of my mouth. For I exhort you, and say to you, beloved, love righteousness, and walk in it, and draw near to righteousness without a double heart. And do not associate with those of a double heart, but walk in righteousness, my sons, and it shall guide you on good paths, and righteousness shall be your companion. For I know that violence must increase on the earth, and a great punishment will be executed on the earth. It shall be cut off from its roots, and its whole construct will be destroyed. and unrighteousness shall again be complete on the earth, and all the deeds of unrighteousness and of violence and sin shall prevail a second time. And when sin and unrighteousness and blasphemy and violence in all kinds of deeds increase, and apostasy and transgression and uncleanness increase, a great chastisement shall come from heaven on all these. And the Holy Lord will come out with wrath and chastisement to execute judgment on earth. In those days, violence shall be cut off from its roots, and the roots of the unrighteousness together with deceit, and they shall be destroyed from under heaven. And all the idols of the heathen shall be abandoned, and the temples burned with fire. And they shall remove them from the whole earth. And the heathen shall be cast into the judgment of fire, and shall perish in wrath and in grievous judgment forever. And the righteous shall arise from their sleep, and wisdom shall arise and be given to them. And after that, the roots of unrighteousness and those who plan violence and those who commit blasphemy shall be cut off, and the sinners shall be destroyed by the sword. Beautiful, ain't it? And after this, there will be another week, the 8th, that of righteousness. And a sword will be given to it, so that the righteous judgment may be executed on those who do wrong. And the sinners will be handed over into the hands of the righteous. And at its end, they will acquire houses because of their righteousness. And a house will be built for the great King in glory forever. And after this, in the 9th week, the righteous judgment will be revealed to the whole world. And all the deeds of the impious will vanish from the whole earth. And the world will be written down for destruction, and all men will look to the path of uprightness. And after this, in the 10th week, in the 7th part, there will be an eternal judgment that will be executed on the watchers and the great eternal heaven that will spring from the midst of the angels. And the first heaven will vanish and pass away, and a new heaven will appear. And all the powers of heaven will shine forever, with light 7 times as bright. And after this, there will be many weeks without number, forever, in goodness and in righteousness. And from then on, sin will never again be mentioned. And now I tell you, my sons, and show you the paths of righteousness and the paths of violence. I will show them to you again, that you may know what will come to pass. And now, hearken to me, my sons, and walk in the paths of righteousness, and walk not in the paths of violence. For all who walk in the paths of unrighteousness shall perish forever. Chapter 92, the book written by Enoch, for all my children who shall live on the earth, and for the future generations who shall observe righteousness and peace. Let not your spirit be troubled on account of the times, For the Holy and Great One has appointed days for all things. And the righteous one shall arise from sleep and walk in the paths of righteousness, and all his path and conversation shall be in eternal goodness and grace. He will be gracious to the righteous and give him eternal righteousness. And he will give him power so that he shall be with goodness and righteousness. And he shall walk in eternal light. And sin shall perish in darkness forever, and shall no more be seen from that day forevermore. Chapter 93. And after that, Enoch both gave and began to recount from the books. And Enoch said, concerning the children of righteousness, and concerning the elect of the world, and concerning the plant of righteousness, I will speak these things. I, Enoch, will declare to you, my sons, according to that which appeared to me in heavenly vision, and which I have known through the word of the holy angels, and have learned from heavenly tablets. And Enoch began to recount from the book and said, I was born the 7th in the first week. Able judgment and righteousness still endured. And after me there shall arise in the 2nd week great wickedness, and deceit shall have sprung up, and in it there shall be the first end. And in it a man shall be saved, and after it is ended, unrighteousness shall grow up, and a law shall be made for the sinners. And after that, in the 3rd week, at its close, a man shall be elected as the plant of righteous judgment, and his posterity shall become the plant of righteousness forevermore. And after that, in the 4th week, at its close, visions of the holy and righteous shall be seen, and a law for all generations, and an enclosure shall be made for them. And after that, in the 5th week, at its close, the house of glory and dominion shall be built forever. And after that, in the 6th week, all who live in it shall be blinded, and the hearts of all of them that shall godlessly forsake wisdom, and in it a man shall ascend, and at its close the house of dominion shall be burned with fire, and the whole race of the chosen root shall be dispersed. And after that, in the 7th week, shall an apostate generation arise, and many shall be its deeds, and all its deeds shall be apostate. And at its end shall be elected, the elect righteous of the eternal plant of righteousness shall be chosen to receive 7-fold instruction concerning all his creation. For who is there of all the children of men that is able to hear the voice of the Holy One without being troubled? And who can think his thoughts? Who is there that can behold all the works of heaven? And how should there be one who could behold heaven? And who is there that could understand the things of heaven, and see a soul or a spirit, and could tell of it? Or ascend and see all their ends, and think them or do like them? And who is there of all men that could know what is the breadth and the length of the earth? And to whom has the measurement been shown of all of them? Or is there anyone who could discern the length of the heaven, and how great is its height, and on what it is founded, and how great is the number of the stars, and where all the luminaries rest? Thank you very much for listening, family. Love you. God bless.